Temos a honra hoje de receber para proferir a palestra aqui intitulada Career Development Path in Systems Engineering, a Courtney. A Courtney, ela fica situada em West Palm Beach, na Flórida, nos Estados Unidos. Ela já trabalha há 12 anos como gerente do programa de certificação do INCOSE, né? Após 12 anos como contratada do governo dos Estados Unidos, ela trabalhou em Atlanta, em uma fábrica de aeronaves, na área de Washington, D.C., para várias agências de defesa, no Johnson Space Center da NASA, e viajou para treinar funcionários da FAA. Ela tem diploma de engenharia mecânica e pesquisa operacional. Ela aplica o pensamento sistêmico em todos os aspectos de sua vida, e sua parte favorita do trabalho com o INCOSE é ajudar indivíduos a aprender e obter crédito por suas habilidades em engenharia de sistemas. Courtney também é ICEP, Expert Systems Engineering Professional. Então, eu vou passar agora a palavra para Courtney, que vai iniciar a sua apresentação. Hello, Courtney. It's a pleasure to have you here. We are very excited for your presentation. And right now, I give you the stage yours whenever you are ready, okay?
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to talk about the career path for systems engineers. I'm going to be going through a handful of slides here, and I hope that we have time for questions at the end. I really prefer conversations with people rather than giving a presentation, but I understand for this format, certainly a presentation is the best way to start off with sharing information. And so I'm going to go through and talk to you a little bit about my experience and what has led me to talk about this topic. Why am I the person who should be talking to you about the career path for systems engineers? And then what advice do I have on that? Why should you have a career path? I'm really going to focus on what is different for a systems engineer and your career path than that for traditional engineers. I really think there's some important stuff in there. And I'm also going to talk about how for women or any other kind of minority, some things matter more for us. Then I'll finish it up with just general career advice. So it's going to start off with what's the problem we're trying to solve? Why am I the person to talk about it? And then we'll go into solutions. And so why am I the person to talk about career paths? Well, as part of my introduction, you all heard I have worked at INCOSE for 12 years overseeing the certification program. And that means that I have interacted with hundreds of individuals of the thousands who got certified during that time. I have interacted with the individuals who were applying, but more importantly, I have interacted with the reviewers who were looking at their applications and saying, here is where I'm uncertain about this person. Here's what I wish that I could see in their application. And to be frank, when I was applying for ESEP, years before I applied for ESEP, I looked at what do I need to do in my career so that there will be no doubt that I am qualified for this. And so that's what I want to pass along to you is from my experience of seeing people around the world, not just at one company, not just in one industry, and at various points in their career. What led a current 60-year-old to be successful is not the same thing that I would recommend for a current 30-year-old, because it wasn't just that was the one path available. And so we're going to try to talk some about the characteristics based on what I've seen of all of these systems engineers who are coming through. And I also acknowledge that not everyone has the same opportunities. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that too, of how you steer your opportunities, what you say no to, and where you can go look for other opportunities beyond what your job gives you. And so there are ways that you can develop skills that are not, my boss gave me an assignment. So proactive, looking forward for stuff. We'll talk some on that. But first, why is a career plan useful? I love that I'm talking to systems engineers because I can tell you the analogy to this. Why are requirements useful, right? Why do we want to list what our objectives are? Well, we're more likely to go in the right direction if we have determined what the right direction is. Even if we don't know the end goal, if we have some objectives, if we have some goals, then more likely to be successful. It helps us make our decisions along the way. So as I said, the same question of why do we want requirements when we're developing a system? That's why we want a career plan when we are making our decisions going forward. As we are going along the way, we can see what steps we need to take. As I told you a couple years ago, I was looking at applying for ESEP in the future, and I thought, what do I need to do to be qualified for that? And so I intentionally looked at, will I be straying from my plan if I do a particular thing? If I cut back on my conference participation, if I say I really want to focus on the operational excellence, but I don't want to do anything that is changing things, that would have strayed me from my plan. So I wanted to prove that I was a leader. I needed to do some leadery things, not just some managery things. And so when I looked at my plan and my goal was become an ESEP, then I was able to check. And in my head, I'm picturing, and the next time I present this, I'll put it on the slides, the milestones that you have along the way, and you say, okay, how am I doing against in any kind of technical performance? You could be doing the same thing with your plan. When you are creating a career plan, it encourages you to think about universality. And by that, I mean, if you don't have a plan and you're just reacting to situations, then you might sub-optimize. You might do what is best for your boss. You might do what is best for your company, but not what is best for you. And you might even do what seems best for you this month, but if you were to think about it, you'd say, oh, wait a second, that doesn't work toward that goal. Of course, you can change your goals. You can say, hey, actually, I don't care about becoming an ESEP. I want to start my own business. Okay, fine. But be intentional about that. And when I talk about the universality of a plan, let me give an example of that. If someone says, and I keep using ESEP because that's for me, but if you were to say, I want to become a chief engineer, or I want to be an entrepreneur who starts my own business, you might have as one step in that plan that you're working for a company that is putting you on track toward what they think a chief engineer needs. But if you were to look around at other companies, or even to look at where you are at 25, what your company says you need to do to be a chief engineer at 45, things may have changed. And so looking at, kind of like with requirements, we don't want to be solution specific. If you look at your plan and your goals, and you look for things that are things that are going to be consistent in different situations, things that are going to move you forward, even if your forward direction tweaks a little bit to the side, that's what you want. That's what your plan's going to help you with. All right, so considering long-term impacts, I got on that, and mitigating the influence of short-term changes. So when you have your long-term goal in mind, then if something steers you off, you're more likely to be able to make the best of that than if you are just reacting to it, and you might continue to fall on that steered off path. So we want to look at, how can I continue to move forward generally, even if not in every single moment. And so what I have borrowed from here is, why do plans and milestones matter, not just for the individual, but for overall stakeholders? I borrowed from INCOSE certification. Why does certification help these various stakeholders? Because certification is one plan. So the same reasons that these stakeholders like the INCOSE certification program, individuals are going to benefit from whatever their own plan is they've identified. So in the middle, I'm going to touch on that first, because That's that individual perspective I've been talking about. An individual with a plan is going to have a resilient set of ideas and objectives that they're working toward, both as they're early in their career and then throughout the career. But then I want to look on the left and right sides of this. The systems engineering community benefits from individuals who are following plans because those folks are headed in the same direction. And that is useful to the community to be able to compare people and to know that those folks are all headed that same direction. On the right side, the organizations and institutions, they can appreciate having individuals who are working toward similar things. It just helps with the communications. It helps with comparing people and understanding what individuals' objectives are going to be. So here I'm going to tell you a little bit about my path, which is not the same thing as what my plan was. I'll compare those a little bit. So let's say I had the plan early on in my career. So on the left side of this, my plan was to be a business person who wears a suit to an office and carries a briefcase. And that was about as far as I had gotten with my plan. I started engineering school because people told me you're good at math and science, be an engineer. I did go to a school that had a good non-engineering program also because I wasn't confident that what I was good at was going to be what I liked doing, but fortunately it was. So have a couple airplanes in my illustration on the left side of my chart here, because before graduation, I had a job at Lockheed Martin in their manufacturing facility, so some aviation related work. After graduation, I actually pursued my private pilot's license, did not end up getting it, but learned more about the aviation side of things, and then also did some further work on the aviation side of things in my career. I then got a undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering, master's degree, operations research. Lower half of below the arrow, you're going to see the personal things and then the professional things above the arrow. So after that second degree, I got married, and with my marriage came a geographic relocation. So where you see the map on there, that means I moved to another part of the country, which is just kind of not an intentional thing that I had in my life, but something that I would say did affect my career. And I do want to highlight that because these personal things do affect an individual's interactions with the world. So they affected my career because I had to prove myself again. And I had to do that in going to college. I went somewhere that I didn't know anyone, it's pretty common, but had to do that early in my career of going in and proving myself as capable and competent. And I wanted to distinguish myself. I was about 4 years out of undergrad, and I really wanted to prove myself as I'm not a fresh out. I have more to give here. Although it was just a small difference, it was significant to me. After that geographic relocation, I found myself in Houston, working for NASA. Very exciting. And then shortly after that, I became the parent of twins. I continued to work in aerospace. Aviation continued to be part of my life. My husband is an airline pilot. So the aviation and the aerospace, you see are recurring themes here. And then continued on through the career side of things into starting to work for INCOSE. And I began a lot of international travel through that work. So that's where our globe is up on the top. Did another geographic relocation from Texas to Florida. Again, this was following my husband's career, and then have continued the international travel extensively because of that INCOSE work. What I don't have displayed on here is 2 more certifications that I got. So I got degrees there on the left, but where you see a little bit of gaps in here, before the geographic relocation, I earned my CSEP. Anytime someone says, sure is hard preparing for the INCOSE knowledge exam, I say, yeah, I sure am glad I did it while my twins were infants and I had free time on my hands, which is a joke because there's there's not free time with infant twins. And so I acknowledge, yeah, it is hard to prepare for that. My twins are now grown, and I just got my ESEP recently. So the other thing that comes in my career path. As I said, my early career plans were be a business person, wear a suit to work. It's definitely not how I'm living my life right now. There's no way I could have seen what the remote work capabilities would look like, as well as I didn't know what kind of business I was going to like doing. My mid-career decision was wanted to be a chief engineer, wanted to have that respect of that role. And I don't think that's the direction that I'm headed now. I've headed off into the technical leadership, and the chief engineers, so, in some situations are going to be in that side of things. But yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about how that path comes to play. But just wanted to let you guys know the perspective I'm coming from with this. And so when I say this is how people are perceived, it's coming from having been there, right? So I have been in these roles, I've been in these rooms, not just the one being judged, but the one judging other people. And I do not, as I talk about people are going to judge you this way, I am no better than anyone else at avoiding these assumptions. And so we can have another conversation about how unfair it is, how do we fight it? But the main conversation to have right now is this is the reality. And so how do we mitigate it within our control? And so I want to talk about how the systems engineer is viewed differently. So SE development, I mean career development, different from those traditional engineers. So the traditional engineers, left side of the screen, the longer someone works as a traditional engineer, the older they are, the longer they've been in that job, the deeper their knowledge is going to be. So they're going to be able to answer really detailed questions because they have increasing specialization, right? This is your electrical engineer. For me at NASA, this was like, oh, they start off at the system level, then they go to the subsystem level, and then they're deeper subsystems of that. They can solve problems that no one else can because of that specialization. They're the person on call. They may have patents. So when I'm looking at the resume of someone who has been around a long time, and I see patents on there, I'm like, oh, that's cool. They've gone deep. I asked someone the other day, like, what do systems engineers get patents in? And the answer was like, in the other field that they worked in before they became a systems engineer. Who has extensive experience, their expertise is recognizable because of these things. They can answer the questions others can't. They know lots of details. The systems engineer, in contrast, everything I just said there, we tweak it a bit. The more experience they have, the more they're going to be able to draw on something related to that, or, oh, here's something that could be relevant, or what if we did this? It is broader, not necessarily that they have specialized experience. Greater scope, both in the system breadth, also the life cycle, like, oh, you know what, this could affect our users this way, or what are we, the systems engineer might say, what's going to be our life cycle? Stop working on this. In contrast to the traditional engineer solving problems that others can't solve, the systems engineer may be solving the same problems as everyone else, but they're doing it better. And man, that's hard to prove. This is a tough pill to swallow, is that we may not solve any problems that someone else couldn't also solve. Nothing special about us. And that frustration, let me tell you, look up Dunning-Kruger effect if you want to have a name to put on that. The Dunning-Kruger here's how it affects us, is that if someone does not understand systems engineering, they may not recognize the good systems engineering that we are doing. They may not see the good when they see it. We're going to come back to a point at the end, but I'll hit on it now, you need people around you who recognize and appreciate systems engineering to recognize and appreciate you. So when I talk about these roles, these differences between traditional and systems engineering, here is a list of which things have those struggles of the systems engineering. So Sarah shared, great systems engineering leader, has done research. I think it was about 20 years ago that Sarah put together her 12 SE roles. She continues to be a leader within INCOSE. And so if you're not connected to her on LinkedIn, see if you can follow her and see, because she does webinars and really great content periodically. If you're doing any of these things here, these are systems engineering, and they are subject to that challenge that others might not see it and appreciate that there are better ways of doing it. And so these are all things that have best practices of them, but people may be doing them without those best practices. And so there's a little bit of extra energy that can be valuable in getting your work appreciated if you're doing these kinds of things. Okay, so the other challenge we have related to systems engineering can be underappreciated. Similarly, women and other minorities can be held to a higher standard. Let me talk a little bit about that. The assumptions that are made about a person before you know their title. And in this case, I'm assuming like once you know the title, that everything loves. But with that assumption, a woman is more likely to be judged based on how she dresses, based on whether she's wearing bright colors and a dress rather than dark colors in a suit. There might be an assumption that she's on the marketing team or that she's in a secretarial role, whereas the darker colors and the kind of boring boxy cut, like, oh, okay, yeah, that's one of the engineers. If she has, there's weight stigma that's out there. There are assumptions about people's work ethic and really unfair stuff. There are going to be assumptions that could be can be in the mind of someone who is interacting with an employee. These are not engineering specific. These are just things that I want us to have the context alongside the what are our obstacles as a systems engineer with the what are obstacles that any of us might face. I put all of these as here are the women ones, right? Because these are things that I can personally speak to. But let me give the contrast to that is that if someone is in the traditional look of the other people in a work environment, so typically going to be the engineers that we're talking about here, then the people in that environment, all of them, men and women, any people of all races and different backgrounds, are going to feel more comfortable and have more easy confidence because there are others who have been successful who looked like that person. They're not going to need much traditional looking people maybe getting credit just based on the degree they come with, and oh, they wouldn't be here if they weren't qualified. Oh, they have the same first name as this other person, or they look like this other person, so they're going to have a smoother path. So what are we going to do about that? A title or a credential. These bring respect faster than if we have to prove ourselves. These level the playing field. And so y'all know I'm coming from a INCOSE certification side of things. So I got my ESEP in the middle there. But let me also tell you, degrees, absolutely, but also titles. The titles matter here. And then one other thing that I didn't put on the slide here is an introduction from someone who is well respected. And so thank you very much for the introduction to my presentation, but that kind of thing matters, so that when someone says, hey, this is Courtney, listen to her, it really helps. And so these sorts of things, I can't emphasize enough. The titles, the credentials, the introductions, those help a lot. So I mentioned ESEP in there, and I say, what does an ESEP look like? What are the frequent characteristics that someone like this is going to have? And I started out with this thing I just said before, graduate degrees, professional society involvement, right? That's what we're here for. So, oh, this is my fellow INCOSE member. Of course, I'm advocating for INCOSE, but whatever professional societies are the right fit for you, that's going to help things out. A lot of our ESEPs have the chief engineer job title, but then let me get this last one. People who have worked on more than one system. So this is not so much what I'm telling you about how to get the respect, right? So those are all very important, but this is going to be, how do you prove that you know how to use systems engineering to solve challenging problems, rather than that you solve challenging problems by knowing all of the details and the history and the personalities and the relationships. It's by having worked on more than one system. So this is the type of thing that I was looking at a couple years ago, is what are the gaps that I need to have? I had worked on more than one system, so that wasn't something that I needed to do, but this is something I suggest everyone put in their career plan. If you want to be an expert systems engineering professional, or if you ever want to switch industries after the first 15 years of your career, try to do it in the first 15 years or around that point, because beyond that, it becomes harder. They're going to see that your depth is in your domain and in your industry rather than in your functional skills. All right, I had a couple of career advices there already, but let me dive into a couple more now. Don't get the don'ts out of the way first. Don't focus on being right. You want to get to the right answer, but you don't need to get credit for that. Don't try to do it yourself. There is a joke about engineers, and there's not very many jokes about engineers, but this was one that I heard I've heard a couple times in my career, and the punchline is basically like, what a foolish junior engineer. They wrote all the requirements on their own rather than reaching out to stakeholders about it. You've missed nothing of the joke by having just that punchline of it, right? But so doing it yourself is absolute failure as a systems engineer. And do not forget the reason for developing the documents. Is it about having them at the end? Rarely. It's usually about the process that you go through to develop them, about the conversations that you have during the development, which is why you're not supposed to do it yourself. So the things to do: listen, so much listening. Listen to the answers to the curious questions you have asked, the questions where you really don't know the answer, not the questions where you're phrasing it as a question, but you're really just trying to criticize. Now, I say you guys wouldn't do this, but be on the listen and lookout for others doing this, and learn some psychology. Learn how to approach people and how to phrase things in a way that's going to move them forward. One of the main jobs that I have had as a systems engineer has been setting up the agendas of meetings such that the right people are saying the things to the right other people in the right order, right? I know all of the information, but what I need to happen is I need this person to say it to this other person so that they will go through the process of figuring out answers on their own. And then finally, I had hinted at this before, work with people who respect your systems engineering skill set. This is really important toward your success. All right, a couple other takeaways that are from I hadn't touched on already, but wanted to make sure I got to them. The best systems engineer is not the best traditional engineer. Not just to say you don't have to be a good traditional engineer, but in fact, if you are a great electrical engineer, that can get in the way of you being a great systems engineer, right? They are separate things, and that which makes us good systems engineers is a feature, not a bug. This is how we want to be, is we want to be not quite the best at those other things to keep our minds open to looking for more things. Deep experience is neither necessary nor sufficient to be a systems engineer. So a systems engineer can be new to a program and still be very valuable. Broad experience is necessary. If you go too broad and stay too shallow too early, then you're going to lose your engineering credentials, and that can limit your future leadership growth. We can dig into that deeper, but I'll just plant that seed right now that just because you're given an opportunity to manage or to do marketing or to do communication or training, be careful about that early on. And I guess I'm digging into it now. Keep along with you the technical engineering deep growth, so that you're not seen as too shallow. And then the importance of being Bjorn presentation at the IS24 was delightful. And they talked about the importance of social and professional support. And I had mentioned that previously, the professional appreciation for you as a systems engineer. Here are additional resources. And with that, my prepared remarks conclude.
Thank you, Courtney, for your presentation. Very interesting. A lot of insights that you brought to us today. Let me check if you have any question. You can use your Q&A chat to write your question. And since we didn't receive any question yet, I would like to ask you one. Is in your presentation you pointed that titles are important, that they matter. And here we are always emphasizing the importance of the certification, because it is something that would, how can I say that? Like, it is one social proof that you studied that content, and now you will be at the same page when discussing with other engineers, and you are aware of all the process that INCOSE has developed through a lot of discussions, a lot of meetings. So could you give us your perception or insights about how valuable is the certification in the US industry, in Europe? Like here in Brazil, I feel that we are going through a change of mindset. Now it's becoming more and more people are looking for to get the certification. But if you could like give us your perception of the certification in the US, it would be very nice.
Yeah, I think so. I actually had a question that I received through LinkedIn the other day from an individual who said, I have a master's in systems engineering. Is there really any additional value to me getting an INCOSE certification? And I shared with this person what my personal experience was, and then I'll generalize on that. So I got my INCOSE CSEP while I was working at NASA, and I was the first on my team to get INCOSE certification, but others were applying for it also. So the two pieces of value that can come from certification can be what you learn while you're working toward it yourself, right? So even if you didn't get certified, the value you get in the training for it, if I can compare it to like an athletic event, right? So the value in training for the event. And that is a notable piece, because you learn a check of, oh, what's the global terminology for this, and how close is my team to that? And also, what are the other pieces of systems engineering that I don't do, just so that I can understand the big picture of how I fit into the world? I think that is incredibly valuable. The second piece to it is getting to put it on your resume, getting to put it in your email signature, getting to use it as you introduce yourself, part of kind of that title thing. And that is shortcutting other people's recognition of your competence. And so I find that is very valuable. But as you said, in some environments, less valuable, because if they don't recognize that as, if they don't recognize it at all, then you have to explain it. However, the explanation gives you the opportunity to tell them what systems engineering is, tell them about yourself, all of that stuff. So it can still have value, even if it isn't automatically recognized. And there's that piece that you said of knowing that I understand things the same way that others do if they have INCOSE certification. Or even if, like with my coworkers, they didn't have it yet, but they were in the process of it. So we had that common reference was really useful. So to the question that I had from someone who had a degree already, I said, this is the benefit that I got from it. Your benefit may vary, because it could be that you know everything you need to know about systems engineering already, and that the people you're going to be around don't yet have the appreciation for this badge. All right, then it's just not going to be as high right there. But what I have found outside the US in particular, but actually even in the US in industries that don't have as much systems engineering, is that there is a real appreciation for a certification, like I said, where someone goes, CSEP, what's that? And you're like, aha, I got them. Now I get to talk about what systems engineering is and why it's so important. If it's okay, I want to segue into answering one of the questions that I saw in the Q&A that's kind of related to that. The question was, how do you promote SE in a software organization? And so toward what I just said of giving you an excuse to talk about systems engineering and how great it is. Anytime that you want to give someone an answer or a solution, right? I'm going to nerd out on systems engineering here for a minute, right? Anytime you want to give them a solution, it should be a solution to a problem they have and that they acknowledge that they have. They may not have told you what their problems are. Opportunities are also allowed, but problems are better. So before you are telling someone how great systems engineering is, it is best to first tell them, like restate for them, here is a problem you have. And now here is how systems engineering solves that problem. And so just, kind of could be something that you use as part of your, like, here's why it matters that I'm a CSEP, because systems engineering is good, all that stuff. But the same thing of anytime you're trying to promote systems engineering, please first start with, it will solve this problem that you agree that we have.
Perfect, thank you. We have other questions here now. Matheus Soares asked, would you say that managerial leadership necessary, as opposed to technical leadership, necessary or even critical for the SE path?
Yeah, great question. I really want to say no. Okay, so that's the answer I'm going to try to justify, because I don't want, because I believe so much that managerial work can take us away from the technical stuff, and the technical stuff is so much fun. So I really want us to be able to do that. So no, I would say that it is okay to be totally in a technical leadership role. However, I want to go back to that. Make sure that you're not just, make sure that it is systems engineering technical leadership, and that it is not just a very senior traditional engineer. Make sure that the way they are doing technical leadership is through the application of systems engineering. And that can be for products and systems. Yeah, you don't have to be managing people or or staff. That's not necessary.
Another question that you have here is, how relevant do you see INCOSE certification to help employees to get promotion in the company?
Yeah, so that I think is going to really vary by the company, but it is it's an opportunity. It on its own, there's going to be a few companies that say, yeah, yay, INCOSE certified, you're automatically promoted, something like that. But I would use to help you get promoted. It's part of evidence, and use it as part of those conversations, like I said. So it's evidence that you understand the international best practices, that you can follow through on independent certification. Talk more about that sort of stuff. But don't expect the promotion to come to you. Use it as part of building your case for something.
Well, perfect. Raquel Hoffman asked, getting lost in SE career is very easy because many roles bring us knowledge and perspectives that add to the systemic vision and can be interesting. Sometimes making plans is hard because SE is comprehensive and has many exciting paths. How to make a career plan and be open to new unseen opportunities?
Yeah, good question. So for me, saying I want to become an ESEP was broad enough that it left me able to be open to opportunities. And I I think that ESEP is probably pretty useful and broad enough for many people in the 10 or more years of experience, and CSEP for the people in the 10 or less years of experience. But even if it were not those specific certifications, let's look at the characteristics of them, which is you want some depth and some breadth of your work experience. And you want to have some knowledge of the principles, the terminology of things, and you want other people to recognize and appreciate this. At the ESEP level, you want to have influenced things through your application of systems engineering. So I think that if you were to take those requirements and drop the ones that aren't relevant to you, come up with something that is, here are the characteristics of my objectives. All right, what plans might I have that would help me achieve those goals? I think that it has to be much broader than requirements. Like we might write, I compared it to requirements, but it can't be nearly that narrow. But you might look for the characteristics of where you would like to be at certain times in your life. For me, my twins are now 18 years old, and they're not needing me. My ability to travel and my ability to just flex things is so much different than it was before. And so my career plan, like my path that I took, was very much, for this period of time, I want minimal travel. For this period of time, I am available. I use travel as an example, but there's other pieces to that, of the being on call, high pressure work, even getting graduate degrees, that sort of stuff that fit into various aspects of my life. And I think that you could have kind of qualitative objectives that could be broad enough, as you're talking about.
Okay, from Lucas Moraes. Thanks for the tips, Courtney. Please, how do you see SE careers and remote work relationship nowadays? Currently, I am an SE in a remote position for an automotive company. Which tips could you share to self-development at a remote job?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question that I hadn't thought about. So thank you for raising that. I personally, I used the word proactive before, and I'm going to use that again now. And so for me, that includes LinkedIn. That includes posting and also commenting on people's posts. That is very public and not necessarily going to help with the promotions, but it's the same kind of vibe that I think is useful internal to your company. So if you have internal meetings or discussion boards, those are great, just to establish yourself as someone knowledgeable on certain topics, attending training, all of that stuff. And it may be beyond the minimum. It may be in your own personal work hours. related to that, I also, and I'm an extrovert, y'all can figure this out by hearing me talk, but I also reach out to people and just do check-ins with them on like, hey, what you working on? Oh, have you considered this? And curiosity, not challenging. Figure out the right medium that works for you. And I say that intentionally because, and figure out what works for them. Some people prefer email. Some people prefer scheduled meeting with cameras on or off. Some people prefer the like drop in on Teams, like, hey, you got a minute? That's where they're most comfortable. So figure out which of those you perform best in, and then which of those other people like, and try to find the balance between those. But I do think you raise an interesting point. I think particularly for people early in their careers right now, it is a challenge that the more senior folks are efficiently working without you and not seeing you, and that really does make it harder. So let me add on two more, or at least one more, is active formal mentorship. So you find someone and you say, will you be my mentor? And you work through defining what that means for you. And then kind of similar to that, if there are any groups, any groups within your organization that you can participate in, even meeting people not on systems engineering topics can be helpful for you in further things. Oh, and that makes me think of also what I had mentioned before, professional societies and ways to grow yourself other than at work. So I have grown myself both as a human and in some professional capacities through my involvement coaching my children's sports. I was involved with writing some diversity accommodations planning for the National Sports League that my child was a part of. I've been involved with my local INCOSE chapter, and that's sometimes if people need experience with financial stuff, will become treasurer for your local INCOSE chapter. So there may be other development opportunities that are outside your company that you can report back to your company, just like you report back to them about your certification.
Okay, we have another question here. I have the impression that many companies still don't know what systems engineering is and how to work using it. Do you think there is still a lot of confusion about this? I think in the Brazilian perspective is very true. I would hear what do you think about that in your context?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's even worse if they think they know what it is and they don't like it, or they think they know what it is and they're like, yeah, so you're like the IT person, right? Because then you have to work around that. So them not knowing what it is maybe second worst. Yep, still a problem. How to work in that system. Okay, so going back to that slide that I said of, it's a problem that you may not do anything that is new to them. They say like, yeah, we've always been writing requirements. We've always been assessing risk, but you're going to do it better. So it is, going to be like just trying to get a chance of like, hey, could I take on this task? I think I've learned some new ways of doing things that might be useful to us. There's going to be a little bit of explanation, a little bit of advocating, asking for some responsibility. But I'm going to emphasize again, figure out what are their problems. So try to apply it in the ways that the things they find most painful right now. In the medical device industry, that's a community that does not appreciate systems engineering as much as they could. And so one of the things that we look at there is they have regulatory approval that they need based on their documentation of how did they develop their system, what are the risks possible, all that kind of stuff. And so there's currently an opportunity to do that development and that documentation alongside the actual system development rather than doing it just for the purpose of the regulators. And that's where I'm seeing systems engineering really promote itself, is you have this problem of this document you have to create anyway. What if you let our contractors who are coming in saying, what if you let us create these documents and we do it in parallel alongside the work being done, right? It's actual systems engineering, is that they're inserting in there toward what I said, do's and don'ts. Don't be hung up on being right, and don't be hung up on terminology. If they don't want to call it systems engineering, don't call it systems engineering. Like figure out what needs to happen to get the successful product. And that may mean that you're calling it a term that they are happy with, but what you're doing is the systems engineering. No lies or sneakiness in that, but just think about what are your actual objectives and try to combine things toward that.
Okay, good. Another question is, what is your tip on how to prepare for the CSAP exam? Before you answer this one, I would say like you have the INCOSE Brazil cohort. It's one tip that I will give you, but I'll let you answer this one as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'll include that as part of my answer, right? So the exam is based on the INCOSE Systems Engineering Handbook. Through March 14th, you can study based on either version of the handbook. Starting on March 15th, the exam is based only on the 5th edition. Another way to say that is there will be new questions coming in starting March 15th that the answers are found only in the 5th edition. So studying based on the handbook. All right. So I just can't say that enough of read the handbook, be prepared with the handbook. But then I'll add in, it's not that exciting to read the handbook. Being part of the cohort is a much better way. And COSE does not require anyone to do training or prep before taking the knowledge exam. There's some organizations that do. However, training and prep and cohorts and practice tests and study buddies are all very motivational. And so I used a sports analogy before, and in sports, in middle-aged sports, they say, whatever sport you're willing to do that sport, right? Whatever's going to get you to have your eyes looking at the content of the handbook the most, that's what you should do. But final tip is, we do have a practice exam available for, I think it's $10 or $20, and it's 10 or 20 questions. It's the same questions every time. Don't do it twice. It's a waste of your time. But if you want just the practice of taking the exam, you can do it that way through the practice exam that counts toward nothing. But if you ever have opportunity to take the exam on paper, or even if you want to just take the exam online without studying, that's a pretty good way to motivate yourself to study more, is by taking the exam and seeing what the questions look like and seeing how hard it is. You're allowed to take the exam up to 3 times in a 12-month period. So if that works out for you, money-wise, paper exams are going to be $30. Online exam is $80 US. Then consider that if that's a good trade-off for your motivation and time.
Great, great. This question is from Andres de la Martiniere. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Awesome presentation, Ms. Wright. What are the most valuable hard and soft skills to become an excellent systems engineer? Would it be valuable to use a skills board to identify unknown skills of the people of the team, or would it be better to take more time to know better the people of the team?
Yeah, okay, so I'm not familiar with the skills board, so if you want to type in anything more about that, you can educate me on that, and I'll try to address that more directly. But first, I'll talk about the most valuable hard and soft skills. Soft skills, I mentioned listening. I mean, really listening and figuring out, what did the person say, but what did they mean? And with that, the flexibility of, that's not what they said, but here's the reality of the situation. So to be able to balance all of those things is really useful. To not put any judgment on someone changing their mind, or that kind of stuff. Most valuable hard skill. I don't know. That's a tough one. I don't have a good answer on that. And so I've just demonstrated another valuable soft skill is willingness to be wrong or to admit that you don't know things. And that's part of the having people around you who appreciate systems engineering, right? Not people who are going to hold that against you, but people who go, oh, respect. Yeah, thanks for not, throwing any lies at me. Yeah, so is there anything you want to add about the skills board? Because I can talk a little bit to like how to identify skills of people on the team, but I'm afraid I'll miss that specific point.
Okay, we just have time for one last question. So I will ask this question from Christopher. We are developing a systems engineering bachelor degree in which students will start to learn systems engineering on the age of 18 to 22 years old. What is your advice to introduce into the curriculum to improve their learning and speed up the knowledge slash experience about it?
Okay, great. Love this question. Part of my work has been with academic equivalencies. We have over 25 universities that have set up academic equivalency to INCOSE certification. So over the past 5 years, I've worked with 25 universities that have succeeded, plus more that are still on the way. Best thing I could recommend is a project, a capstone project, something where they have to identify the requirements, the verification methods, the risks to all of that. So not just question and answer, but like overall end to end, how are we going to design the system? That's going to be your best way to experience systems engineering. I would love to see capstone courses, can be groups, can be individuals, could be a thesis, whatever we call it. I would love to see that for every engineering student, not just the systems engineers. I think that they would all be better engineers if they did that.
Okay, perfect. Just to one last comment here, Andreas wrote like skills board is a board hanged on the wall where people write their all the skills they have so the managers can pick them even not knowing before that they had the needed skills.
I'm generally opposed to that. I reactively haven't experienced it. But if you look up Dunning-Kruger effect that I mentioned before, you're going to have people who don't judge themselves the same way others judge themselves. And so some people are going to be hard on themselves and not list a skill that they actually have at a higher level than someone else who's super confident in listing all of their skills that they maybe have only academically, but not in practice. I think the alternative I suggested was conversations with people. And yeah, I'd say that'd be better.
Perfect. Courtney, I would just would say thank you for your participation here. It's a pleasure to have you with us. I don't know how good is your Portuguese. Feel free to join us for the next presentation. But it was very insightful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for including me.